If the providence for solving all the world's problems only lie in men's brains, then what you're saying is 50% of our society can't help you solve all the problems and challenges of the world, and that you're willing as men to solve that all by yourself. Well, you've had the globe now for all these years. How's that going?
This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, a conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion with Amelia Ransom, the retired Vice President of DEI at Smartsheet. Amelia will be the keynote speaker for the graduation ceremony of United Way of King County's Project Lead, a training program that aims to increase the representation of people of color on nonprofit boards and in other positions of community leadership. In this episode, Amelia would chat about some of the biggest misconceptions about DEI, the differences between equality and equity, and the future of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which at present is under attack from state legislators nationwide and our federal government. We will also discuss United Way's free tax preparation campaign and an upcoming volunteer opportunity. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. There are many organizations and companies that provide services, resources, and opportunities for communities of color, people with disabilities, the LGBTQIA+ community, veterans, and women. But what if the leaders of those organizations don't look like the people they seek to serve? People of color, for example, make up about 40% of the United States population. But according to a 2021 report from BoardSource, about 87% of nonprofit CEOs in the U.S. are white, about 83% of board chairs are white, and about 78% of all nonprofit board members are white. Many of those nonprofits work in communities of color. So it should be no surprise that BoardSource reports almost half of all CEOs surveyed said they did not have the right board members to establish trust with the communities they serve. That's why more than 30 years ago, United Way of King County launched Project Leadership, Effective, and Diversity, or Project LEAD. It is a nonprofit board training program that gives people of color the skills and expertise to make impact in leadership roles. More than 1,000 people have graduated from the program and have since ensured that communities are represented and heard on advisory and governing boards. The month-long program also includes a fundraising cohort. Participants are asked to raise at least $200 throughout the course of the certificate program. The goals of Project LEAD align with the nation's movement toward what is called diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. The American Civil Liberties Union defines DEI as a framework for building institutions where everyone belongs and is able to thrive, while addressing systemic barriers that have historically excluded marginalized communities. The American Civil Liberties definition also includes accessibility, and it calls the framework DEIA. Critics of DEI argue that it benefits only Black and brown people, but that is not the case. A CNN story about the benefits of DEI explained that DEI programs and employee resource groups have played a significant role in ushering in health insurance coverage for employees needing infertility treatments. DEI has also benefited people with disabilities, veterans, the LGBTQIA+ community, and women of all races. Yet anti-DEI sentiment, though prevalent for years, has been amplified recently amid efforts by state and federal lawmakers to eliminate the framework. In 2024, legislatures in more than 30 states introduced or passed more than 100 anti-DEI bills. And this year, the White House has issued executive orders ending DEI within federal government. At United Way of King County, we are working to transform communities through equity-based programs that address immediate needs and through policy advocacy to undo systemic racism and inequality. We are committed to building an equitable future, ensuring everyone in our community has access to housing, food, educational opportunities, and financial stability. And we do so with a staff that is 48% people of color, 69% female, and 54% aged 40 and under. People of color comprise about half of our leadership and about half of our board. And for this year's graduation ceremony for Project Lead participants, United Way has enlisted Amelia Ransom, the retired Vice President of DE&I at Smartsheet, as the graduation ceremony's guest speaker. Amelia has more than 30 years of experience driving culture, strategy, and leadership development. In addition to her work at Smartsheet, Amelia has spent more than a dozen years at Nordstrom in roles such as Director of Talent and Director of Learning and Development. On the eve of our upcoming Project Lead graduation ceremony, Hourglass sat down with Amelia to discuss topics such as the misconceptions about DEI, the differences between equality and equity, and the future of DEI. But we began with Amelia stating why she decided to be the keynote speaker for Project Lead's graduation.
What I know about Project Lead is, its ability to really ready people for nonprofit board service, which I think is really important in our community. I have been serving on nonprofit boards for a long time now. I started in a year that started with a 1. So there's that. And so I think helping folks be ready to serve is really important. And anything that I could possibly say to support folks in our community wanting to do that work, I'm absolutely down for.
Good. And having been that one, looking back on it now, what are some of the things that made you say, I thought I knew what this space was going to be like, but now that I'm in it, I had no idea about blank. What would that blank be?
I think I had no idea how much the nonprofit space, particularly where I have been serving, which is around social and community equity, justice, around those areas. I think I didn't understand how much they replicate family structures, right? So if you have family or a good social network or a good friend group or whatever that is, and you have the ability to ask people for support. If you have the ability to call a friend and say, hey, I'd love to get my kid into this internship at X company. Do you know somebody there? Or if you have the ability to say, you know what, I'm going through a tough time and so I'm grieving or whatever that is. And so the meal train just shows up at your house because you already have an intact community. That's really a privilege. And that's really what a lot of nonprofits do. They become surrogate families and really replicate that family structure. And I don't think I really understood that until I started really working with a lot of different nonprofits.
I want you to think about where DEI is right now. And it feels like now that you're retired, you can kind of take a look at it differently than maybe someone who's in it. In light of what's going on with the White House, what in your mind is the current state of DEI?
I believe companies have used DEI in 2 major different ways. There's probably more, but I'll just go with these 2. And that is either as an insurance policy or as a strategic initiative. And so what we're seeing right now is organizations who have leveraged DEI as an insurance policy are now saying, well, I don't need to insure that risk anymore. That risk is being insured somewhere else.
Okay.
On Pennsylvania Avenue. And so I no longer need to do that. Companies that are using it as a strategic initiative are saying, I don't really care what's going on Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm doing this because I know it's good for me. It's good for my customers. It's good for my business. So we're just going to keep going because that's what we do. We return to our shareholders what is due to our shareholders, and this enables us to do that. But some companies weren't looking at it that way. And so as I say to people, if you have to pull out your insurance policy today, if something happens to you today, and I hope it does not, that requires you to pull out your insurance policy, you can be guaranteed you're having a bad day. So they weren't looking at it as a good thing. They were looking at it as this is the cost of doing business. Well, if I don't have to undertake that cost, I'm going to cut it as soon as I can.
Well, did that surprise you?
No, because many companies, I have been in and around DEI work since, let's just say a long time ago, before this century. So you now can spot it, right? You now know how to identify that. And I'm not saying having insurance is a bad thing. I have insurance. You have insurance on your car, your home, your, whatever else you have that's valuable to your life, the things that you have. Insurance isn't bad. But insurance isn't a strategic initiative necessarily. It is, supporting you should a catastrophe occur. And if that's who you are, then that's what you're doing. Right. Yeah. So no, that doesn't surprise me because many companies in 2020 particularly sort of stood up DEI really quickly as an insurance policy so they could attract and retain talent who was now looking for that. So they wanted to be able to say they had it. That's not necessarily a long-term strategic initiative.
I'm kind of staying with that to a degree. What are some of the biggest misconceptions, particularly in the mainstream, about DEI?
That it's just for Black people. That's the biggest one. When people say DEI, other people sometimes hear Black. And while DEI does include Black people, it includes lots of other things people don't always think of. Last week, I said to someone who was asking about DEI, well, if you plan to live longer than 39 years old, then you too will be quote unquote DEI. Because the Americans with Americans for, now I can't remember, ADEA, Age Discrimination and Employment Act. Sorry, I had to get all my acronyms right. The Age Discrimination and Employment Act covers workers 40 and over. So if you're over 39 years old, you too are DEI. If you have a disability, hidden or not, you too are DEI, right? So it includes lots of things that aren't Black.
Yeah, and it's amazing how that hasn't gotten out as much. And I was kind of wondering, was it because it hit the popularity during George Floyd? Because it's been there for a long time.
Yes, that is one of the main reasons why. Is because of George Floyd. And then after that, you had, not after that, but sort of around the same time, you have George Floyd, you have Me Too, you have Stop Asian Hate, you have a few other things, right? But I think the loudest voice there was around Me Too and around George Floyd. So if people don't hear Black, then they definitely hear woman. And those are I would say, the main things that people hear when they hear DEI. They forgot about, accessible buildings. They forgot about parental leave, because parental leave used to be maternity leave. If you are a non-birthing parent, so an adoptive parent or a man, if you are a non-birthing parent and you now have leave from your company, take DEI.
What can be done to change that narrative?
I think a continual reminder to people that DEI is the thing that we use, one of the things that we use to create the meritocracy we speak about so much. We've not had yet a meritocracy in this country. DEI is our attempt at getting one. And so continuing to just truth the narrative when we hear it is it's exhausting and tiring sometimes, I understand, but it's also really important to remind people exactly what it is, which is why I said to the person I was talking to last week, like, if you're older than 39, you too are DEI. And I have to admit, he was shocked. And I was like, you've never heard of the Age Discrimination and Employment Act.
Whoa.
You've never heard of it. And as an HR professional, I can tell you that organizations use it and leverage it all the time to ensure that they are treating employees fairly in the workplace, older or younger in the workplace. I can assure you of that.
I read some of the work around what you've done, and I read some Q&A interviews, and you talk about the difference between equality and equity. I want to know if you can just sort of go into that.
Sure. Equality is not necessarily the goal. And I'm speaking about organization and even in community. Equality is not the goal. Equality says I give every single person the same thing. So let's take that to an example. If you work in an organization and at your organization, upon hire, you get a laptop, okay? Equality says I give every single person the exact same laptop and I don't deviate from that. That's equality. Equity says I might give the designers in my organization a MacBook. I might give the finance people a Chromebook or something else. I might give another group of people something else. I might give, if I do artwork, I might give them a tablet. I might give them the tool that they need to get their job done. That's the difference. Equity says I meet the need where the need is. And I ensure that you have what you need in order to be able to compete. Right? It doesn't say, and just to be really clear, it doesn't say I reduce the standards so that I'm really only hiring based on life experience, because a lot of people think that you're only hiring based on lived experience. The only reason that person got the job is because they are fill in the blank. And that just doesn't really happen, particularly to the degree I think people want to believe that it happened.
Wow. I think one of my first, I used to be a sports writer for the Boston Globe. I think one of my first examples of that, there was a businessman, Victor Kiam, who owned the Remington Shaver Company. When he bought the New England Patriots, he gave every player a Remington electric shaver, but he gave the black players what was called a black man shaver. That was the actual name of the shaver, because it was a shaver that was designed to cut hair that was more like someone of color, whose hair strands can be coarser and curlier. And you've used the wrong kind of shaver, you get bumps. And it was the first time I'd ever seen someone that gave that much attention to differences in people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But it's important because it means you don't see me. Because colorblind, this notion of colorblind would suggest that I shouldn't see color. I should never acknowledge it. I should never talk about it. It should not be part of my judgment or how I make any considerations. And I just think, to your point, which is an excellent story, you have to see color in order to make that excellent distinction to give people what they need. I don't care if you see my color. I'm black. And if God could make me again, I would ask him to make me black. You don't need to not see it. Right? Every morning I get up and look in the mirror and I'm like, still black? Yes. Right? I'm thrilled beyond belief. But for you not to see it says you don't see something in myself that I think is absolutely wonderful.
Great. I want to also talk about, I read something where you had mentioned, it was the naming of buildings. I hear people telling about conference rooms named for Octavia Butler and Chief Sealth. Conference room names may sound like a small thing, but this is what engagement looks like. So did that actually happen?
It did actually happen. It did. That happened at a company that I worked for, and we were naming each floor's conference rooms, I should say, were named with a different theme, right? You have mountains, or you have, rivers or lakes or whatever it is. And many tech companies do this. It's just a fun way to engage in the workplace. And when it came to a particular floor, we were talking about notable Washingtonians because we were based in Washington. And, I had the idea of letting employees decide. you decide who we should recognize with these conference rooms. And employees just came up with the best ideas. Chief Self, Octavia Butler, there were so many people. And what was great was when people would go in the rooms, there was a write-up about each person on the room. And so many people said things like, I didn't know Octavia Butler had any connection to Seattle, right? I didn't know she had any connection here. Oh, I've never heard of Parable of the Sower. What is that? So many conversations were started around this, right? I had no idea, about Jimi Hendrix or Quincy Jones or whatever. And that was really a way for employees to see and be seen and have their ideas recognized, but also in a really valuable way. And we didn't have to worry. I think some people, rightfully so, I think we're saying like, well, what if there's no diversity within the people that employees choose? And I just really have to tell you, I didn't worry about that part. Mm-hmm. I really didn't. The only thing that I said, and this is true, at the end when the voting happened and they had all the names and they said, well, then which conference rooms should we put each name on, right? I said, the only thing I would say is Chief Self, who employees had chosen, should get the biggest room.
Oh, right.
That was the only thing that I sort of like, I'll call it manipulated in the background. But once it was decided, I was like, Chief Self ought to get the biggest room, okay?
Right.
Listen.
Right.
Recognize.
Oh, cool.
Just have a couple more questions. Is we talk about Project Lead, and there are some people who are going to use that experience to actually get placed on boards. So how do you do that and bring all of that and still bring your unique self and not be the one person who always has to bring up DEI?
Right.
Becomes the DEI spokesperson or the spokesperson about equity or the spokesperson about fairness and diversity.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I recommend to people, and frankly, it's a tactic that I use all the time. I don't often lead with DEI, but I'm going to ask you questions about your own goals that lead you right to DEI, right? So if you tell me that as a nonprofit, you would like to serve, more underserved children in our community, I'm just making that one up.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going to ask you where you think the underserved children are. And I'm going to ask you, how do you think we might find them? And what stops us from engaging with them right now?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to lead us right there. Now, there might be other reasons too. And those should be surfaced as well. But I can guarantee that conversation is going to lead us right to children of color, how we might not be engaging them, what their parents may need that we're not providing, whatever that is. And it's the same thing that I've done in business. So I want to be clear. There's nothing different here for me between the for-profit and the nonprofit sectors. Inside corporate organizations, I'm not really, people would ask me, what is your DEI strategy? I don't have one. I have the company strategy. The company strategy is something like global domination, world recognized, something like that. So if that is your goal, then I'm going to say, okay, well, how is it that you would like to be a global company? Because the globe doesn't look like you. The globe looks like me and her and the rest of us. So how are you going to do business around the globe when you don't understand the globe?
Awesome.
Now we're back at DEI. See how we got back there?
Right. It's pretty amazing.
We got right there.
So the last question, I want you to think about a crystal ball, really. What is the future of DEI?
To answer that question, I really have to say, you have to think about the values and then you think about the practices. And I've been saying this for a long time. So anyone who's hearing this right now, who's literally rolling their eyes because you've heard me say this for 20 years, I'm sorry, I'm saying it again. The value of creating a meritocracy is the reason that we have DEI. DEI is a practice, not a value. The value is equity. The value is innovation. The value is something else. DEI is a practice. Now, I am telling you right now, there will be people that disagree with this. But I firmly believe DEI exists so that something else can exist, so that you have an innovative society. There are no easy problems left. We have solved all the easy problems. The cheese has been sliced. The wheels have been made. Like, all of that has already happened. What we're left with are some of these really intractable things we've got to get our arms around. And as you look around, let's just take gender as an example. If the providence for solving all the world's problems only lie in men's brains, then what you're saying is 50% of our society can't help you solve all the problems and challenges of the world, and that you're willing as men to solve that all by yourself. Well, you've had the globe now for all these years. How's that going? How's that working out for you? So if our goals are, we want to be the best, we want to be whatever it is, the best country, the best company, the best community, the best region, the best city, whatever it is, everybody's got to pull their weight. Well, everybody can't pull their weight if they don't have the opportunity to pull their weight. So DEI is a value. Values don't change. Values do not change. Practices do change, and in fact, they must change in order for you to remain loyal to your values. So I've been doing this work for so long, before it was called DEI, before it was affirmative action, before it was, I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. So if you don't call it DEI tomorrow, that's fine. I know what the work is. I recognize it. It's just like anybody else. In your life, you may have different names. You may be called different things based on different relationships. You might be called mom or dad. You might be called sis. You might be called auntie. You might be called different things. You still know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I know who I am. So if we don't call it DEI, that's okay. As long as we keep the value, the practice can change.
Mm-hmm. Amelia Ransom retired.
Yes.
From Smartsheet. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being with you, and I cannot wait to be at Project Lead. I can't wait to be at graduation.
For more information about United Way of King County's Project Lead, log on to our website at uwkc.org. It's tax time again, and United Way of King County is offering free tax services to individuals who make less than $80,000 a year, or less than $96,000 for non-single filers. Funded by United Way, the IRS, and the City of Seattle, the free tax preparation campaign runs until Sunday, April 19th. Services are available at more than a dozen locations across King County, including El Centro de la Raza and West Seattle Community Resource Center in Seattle, Hope Link in Shoreline, South Center Mall in Tukwila, and the Public Health Center in Kent. Virtual service is also available through our online tax site. United Way tax preparation specialists will help clients understand their tax situations and take advantage of refunds like the Earned Income Credit, the Child Tax Credit, and the Working Families Tax Credit. Last year, our free tax campaign served more than 12,000 people and leveraged more than $16 million in tax refunds. And we look forward to preparing your taxes this year. For more information, log on to freetaxexperts.org. Interested in a volunteer opportunity? Sound Generations is seeking volunteers to join its Meals on Wheels program. Located in Seattle, Sound Generations promotes the social, emotional, and physical well-being of older adults through a network of community connections and services. Sound Generation's Meals on Wheels program provides well-balanced, nutritious, ready-to-eat meals each week, with home delivery and specialized options like vegetarian and kosher meals. As a Meals on Wheels volunteer, you'll be part of a team that delivers meals to homebound seniors. Sound Generations is looking for drivers and meat packers to support deliveries in SeaTac. For more information, log on to soundgenerations.org. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.